of the feudal age was a continent of fragmented powers. Kings, nobles, and city-states competed for control, while the common people often suffered under disorder and conflict. Yet, a new political system was emerging, a strong, centralized monarchy. Several powerful monarchies were established in Europe towards the end of the feudal age. Absolute monarchy consolidated national unity. Among the most prominent were England, France, Spain, Austria, Prussia, and Russia. England was plagued by extreme disorder until the mid-15th century. The Tudor era saw the establishment of autocracy, laying the foundation for a strong, national monarchy. Kings like Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth I strengthened central authority while stabilizing the nation. In France, the Bourbon dynasty became absolute, simultaneously establishing France as a powerful state. Louis XIV, later known as the Sun King, exemplified the peak of centralized authority, using his court, army, and diplomacy to expand influence and unify the nation. Russia was once fragmented into separate territories. The rise of the Romanov Tsars contributed to a powerful monarchy. Most notably, Peter the Great modernized Russia, strengthened the military, and centralized authority, transforming it into a major European power. This documentary will explore how these monarchies arose, the factors that strengthened their power, and the legacy they left on modern Europe. From autocratic rule to cultural patronage, from military might to bureaucratic innovation, the age of strong monarchies reshaped the continent forever. Causes for strong monarchy. One of the earliest causes of strong monarchy in Europe was the Crusades. Kings led armies to distant lands, asserting their authority over feudal lords while expanding trade and influence. As feudal lords focused on foreign campaigns, monarchs consolidated power at home. The Renaissance revived classical knowledge, particularly Roman law, which supported the idea that the king's will could be the law. Scholars and intellectuals argued that centralized authority was necessary for order, stability, and national prosperity. Niccolò Machiavelli, in his book The Prince, argued that strong, sometimes ruthless, leadership was necessary for a state to survive. His ideas influenced European monarchs, showing them that power, cunning, and diplomacy were essential tools of governance. English philosopher Thomas Hobbes argued that only a strong monarchy could prevent chaos. The turmoil of the Civil War and the execution of Charles I demonstrated that weak leadership led to disorder. His social contract theory justified absolute authority to maintain peace. Economic factors also played a key role. As towns and cities grew, a rising middle class demanded security, law, and order. Kings who could provide stability gained the support of merchants, helping consolidate central authority. Advancements in military technology, particularly gunpowder, allowed kings to maintain standing armies independent of feudal lords. With military and economic power concentrated in the monarchy, feudal influence declined, paving the way for centralized states. Political, economic, and religious factors. Economic changes played a pivotal role in strengthening monarchies. A growing middle class, merchants, artisans, and urban elites, sought security, fair taxation, and stable governance. Kings who could provide this stability gained their support, further consolidating authority. Military advancements, particularly the use of gunpowder, transformed European warfare. Monarchs could now maintain standing armies loyal to the crown rather than feudal lords, reducing the power of the nobility and reinforcing central control. Religious factors also contributed. The Reformation fragmented the authority of the Roman Catholic Church, allowing monarchs, especially Protestant kings, to assert control over churches and clergy. Even Catholic rulers gradually curtailed the influence of the church to strengthen the state. Many monarchs seized church lands, selling them to rising merchants and townspeople. This not only enriched the crown but also created loyal supporters among the middle class, linking economic power with political authority. Politically, monarchs centralized power by creating councils, appointing loyal ministers, and reducing the influence of feudal lords. Effective governance and law enforcement further enhanced their authority, solidifying their role as the chief executive and ultimate source of justice. Through economic, military, and religious strategies, monarchs strengthened their position across Europe. By the early modern period, kings no longer relied solely on birthright. They commanded armies, controlled wealth, and shaped society, laying the foundation for the era of absolute monarchy. Rise of major dynasties. In England, the Tudor dynasty stabilized the monarchy after decades of civil war and disorder. Henry VIII and Elizabeth I centralized power, strengthened the Royal Navy, and promoted national unity, setting the stage for England's rise as a European power. Music cue. Regal strings with subtle tension for political consolidation. In France, the Bourbon dynasty, especially under Louis XIV, epitomized absolute monarchy. Louis' centralized administration subdued the nobility and projected power through culture, diplomacy, and military strength, making France the leading state in Europe. Music cue. Majestic orchestral crescendo to emphasize grandeur and power. Austria's Habsburgs faced a multi-ethnic empire. Maria Theresa and her son Joseph II modernized administration, taxation, and education, reinforcing loyalty to the crown and ensuring that even diverse territories recognized central authority. Music cue. Formal, disciplined orchestral rhythm highlighting structured governance. Prussia's Hohenzollerns, led by Frederick the Great, emphasized military discipline, state organization, and education. The army became the backbone of Prussia's power, and citizens identified strongly with the centralized state. Music cue. Intense percussion and brass for military focus, triumphant strings for national pride. Russia, under the Romanovs, transitioned from fragmented territories into a unified state. Peter the Great modernized the military, built St. Petersburg as a new capital, and centralized administration, transforming Russia into a major European power. Music cue. Bold orchestral themes, mixing drums and strings to reflect modernization and expansion. By the early 17th century, Europe's major dynasties had established themselves as symbols of national unity, stability, and power. Monarchs combined military strength, cultural patronage, and political authority to shape the modern European state system. Absolute rule in practice. Absolute monarchs ruled with unquestioned authority. They appointed ministers, oversaw justice, controlled finances, and directed foreign policy. In this era, the king became the central figure in every aspect of national life. Music cue. Formal, steady orchestral rhythm emphasizing authority and order. Louis XIV exemplified absolute rule. His court at Versailles displayed both grandeur and control, ensuring that the nobility remained dependent on the king while he exercised direct influence over politics, culture, and society. In Prussia, Frederick the Great used military strength to consolidate power. A disciplined army became the backbone of the state, enabling the king to enforce laws, defend borders, and maintain centralized authority over his subjects. Music cue. Intense percussion and brass emphasizing military discipline and authority. Peter the Great transformed Russia with sweeping reforms. By modernizing the army, navy, and administration, he centralized power and projected Russia as a European superpower, blending autocracy with innovation. Absolute monarchs also influenced economic life. They regulated trade, imposed taxes, and encouraged commerce, linking economic prosperity with royal authority. Citizens looked to the king for stability and opportunity. In every kingdom, the absolute monarch was the ultimate executive, judge, and military leader. Through centralized control, strong armies, and loyal bureaucracy, these rulers created nations that were more unified, powerful, and enduring than any before in Europe. Revolution and reform in England. England, despite the rise of strong monarchs, faced internal turmoil. The 17th century saw the English Civil War, a conflict between the king and parliament over authority, taxes, and governance. King Charles I's attempts to rule without parliament and impose taxes led to widespread discontent. Citizens and nobles alike questioned the limits of royal power, setting the stage for revolution. Oliver Cromwell and his new model army challenged the monarchy directly, emphasizing that governance required accountability. This military force became the instrument of revolutionary change. In 1649, Charles I was executed, an unprecedented act that shook Europe. It demonstrated the consequences of unchecked royal authority and the rising power of parliament and the people. Music cue. Somber, slow strings with low brass for gravity of the moment. The monarchy was restored in 1660 with Charles II, but lessons were learned. The Glorious Revolution later ensured a constitutional monarchy, balancing royal authority with parliamentary power. England's experience illustrated that even strong monarchies must adapt. Constitutional limits and shared governance allowed the monarchy to survive while maintaining national stability and unity. In France, Louis XIV used the court of Versailles to centralize power. By controlling the nobility through ceremony, luxury, and patronage, he ensured loyalty while projecting France as the most powerful European state. Prussia under Frederick the Great became a model of military efficiency and state organization. A disciplined army, efficient bureaucracy, and strong legal system strengthened the monarchy and unified the state. Austria's Habsburg rulers faced diverse populations. Maria Theresa and Joseph II implemented reforms to standardize administration, improve education, and ensure taxation compliance, fostering unity across the empire. Peter the Great transformed Russia into a modern state. By building a navy, reforming the army, and modernizing cities, he centralized authority and integrated Russia into the European political and economic sphere. Across Europe, monarchs combined military power, economic control, and cultural patronage to consolidate national unity. Centralized governments emerged as the defining feature of the modern state. National identity and loyalty to the crown became central to society. Monarchs were seen as symbols of unity, guardians of law, and promoters of prosperity, shaping the course of European history. Enlightenment and early challenges. The Enlightenment introduced new ideas challenging absolute monarchy. Philosophers and thinkers debated reason, liberty, and governance, inspiring both rulers and citizens to rethink authority and social order. The printing press spread Enlightenment ideas across Europe. Critiques of monarchy, advocacy for rights, and calls for reform reached a growing literate population, sowing seeds of social and political change. Even strong monarchies faced early challenges. Peasant uprisings, noble resistance, and calls for reform forced rulers to balance authority with concessions to maintain stability. Monarchs responded by modernizing administration, codifying laws, and centralizing power. Reforms often strengthened the monarchy by demonstrating efficiency, justice, and responsiveness to societal needs. Cultural patronage remained a tool of power. Monarchs supported the arts, sciences, and education to project prestige, gain loyalty, and promote the idea of enlightened rule. The Enlightenment did not immediately overthrow monarchies but reshaped them. Absolute rulers who adapted, embracing reason, reform, and education, secured lasting authority while responding to early calls for change. Nationalism, wars, and transformation. By the late 17th and 18th centuries, wars between European powers became a tool to assert national strength. Monarchs used military campaigns to expand territories, protect trade, and reinforce central authority. France, Prussia, Russia, and Austria solidified borders through military victories and strategic diplomacy. These wars helped unify diverse populations under centralized states, fostering a sense of national identity. Nationalism began to emerge, linking the population's loyalty to the monarchy. Citizens viewed the king as the living symbol of unity, sovereignty, and national pride. Economic growth supported national unity. Kings regulated trade, encouraged industry, and collected taxes efficiently, strengthening the monarchy while creating prosperity that reinforced loyalty among the populace. Diplomacy and alliances became essential. Monarchs used treaties to secure borders, protect commerce, and prevent internal instability, ensuring that centralized power remained unchallenged. Through war, diplomacy, and economic control, European monarchies transformed. Centralized power, national identity,